by the time we're done today, you should all be comfortable navigating eTIP, making changes, and running reports. I know that, also, sorry, a reminder, we are recording this. Okay, so I know that we have some, veteran eTIP users on here today and then some new users. So I hope we all can get something out of today's training. I know it is not the most exciting material, but good news is that it should take closer to an hour instead of the hour and a half I blocked off. So let's jump into things. Before I get started, just a quick review of what the eTIP is. It is the official record of federal transportation funding and regionally significant state or locally funded projects. And it's also a tool for programmers to submit new projects and project changes for consideration by the CMAP Transportation Committee and the MPO Policy Committee. FHWA and FTA also use this. They provide oversight to ensure that projects submitted for federal participation are deemed a priority for the region and can be accomplished using the region's expected revenues. So we're going to quickly run through setting up an account. I believe everyone here has one, so this will be brief. There are separate secure and public sites with different URLs. Today we're talking about the secure site, which relies on individual user authentication. So to get started, there's that URL at the bottom that directs you to the eTIP login page. And if anyone doesn't have an account, you'd want to click the Click Here button that the green arrow is pointing to. Next, it's going to ask you to provide an email address. And then you'll be asked to fill out this form. A few notes about the form. Your email address is your username. And then the phone number and name that you enter may be used by CMAP staff and other database users to contact you. If you will also be listed as a project contact for the public will see this information. So just keep that in mind when choosing your phone and email address. And then finally, you're going to want to select your agency. So just select the appropriate council from the list. And then finally, you'll need to select user type. Everyone here should be a sponsor, as you'll all have responsibility for reviewing and making project changes. And then once you hit submit, you'll receive an email indicating that you have successfully submitted a request for an account. You'll want to click the link in that email to verify your address. That step lets CMAP staff know about your request. We try to get those done as soon as possible. However, we do ask for about 2 or 3 business days. And then once you are approved, you'll receive an email from us, and then you can just go back in and log in with that email as your username and the password. So the last slide of this section, this is a table out of the eTIP User Guide, Chapter 1. It shows edit and read-only rights by user or agency. When you're a new user, CMAP typically sets you up to edit and view just your agency's projects. And then as you become more familiar with the eTIP and the region's programming processes, we'll add other agencies as read-only to your user account. So now we're just going to step through the eTIP homepage. All users have the same navigation bar at the top of the homepage. I'm not going to read all of this to you. We're going to step through the different menus in a moment. I do want to highlight that at any time, you can click the CMAP logo in the top left corner to get back to the home page. So first we have the Project Tools menu. The first option is the My CFP or Call for Projects list. This will bring you to a list of applications which have not been selected for funding. The next option is a My Projects list. This shows a complete list of the latest approved versions of projects for which you have edit or read-only rights for. Then there's the option to amend TIP projects, so you can start an amendment here. Project changes are done via amendments, and new projects are also created via amendments. And then lastly, we have the TIP adoption option. That is so you can start an adoption there. That occurs annually around September and October. The adoption involves changing the federal fiscal years included in the TIP, and it requires users to review each individual project to determine if it's been completed, delayed, or should be carried forward into the new TIP. Then we have a reports menu. This provides a variety of report options, each with filtering options in order to select the data you want to include. So as you can see here, we have PDF reports, data tables, financial reports, as well as an option towards the bottom to export raw data. We will get back to this topic later. We have a section dedicated to running a few specific reports. Then there's the other tools menu. This just provides some administrative options. So if you want to change your password or launch the public site, you can also contact the help desk through this menu. Please only contact the help desk for technical issues. Anything content related, let CMAP staff know. We have these last few items on the right here. So the 4 symbols there are shortcuts. They'll direct you to lists of your projects that are in progress, denied, pending, or accepted. Then there is a quick search box. You can enter in IDs here. So that might be the TIP ID, section ID, etc. And then we also have an advanced search feature. As you'll see in that bottom screenshot, it just has extra filtering options. So you can choose lead agency or exempt status. And then of course, when you want to log out, it's that last symbol on the right. This is the final slide of this section. So for users with edit rights, the homepage provides an at-a-glance summary of the status of changes to projects the user has editing rights for. Those changes will either fall into the category of an amendment or an adoption. Clicking on any of the project counts will open a list of those projects from which the user can take further action. We will discuss those actions in the next section. You'll notice that the 2 boxes on the right for adoptions are grayed out. Those are only active in the fall when we complete the changeover from the current federal fiscal year to the next federal fiscal year. I do want to highlight the difference between in-progress amendments and then the in-progress CFP amendments. So if we look at these 2 boxes on the left side, the ones without the CFP, so the in-progress and submitted, those are projects and actions related to the current TIP, whereas on the right side with the CFP notation are projects and actions related to calls for projects. The CFP module is where we accept applications for CMAQ, TAP, and STP funding. There is separate training and a separate eTIP user guide related to call for projects. The majority of your work will be completed on regular TIP projects and actions, except from January to March each year when there may be a call for projects going on like we have right now. So I'm just going to pause really quickly, see if anyone has any questions, if anyone wants to type anything into the chat box. Give you a second. Okay. Oh, we got one more person joining. Okay. Well, then let's move on to TIP actions. So there are 2 types of TIP actions. We have adoptions and amendments. Adoptions, those occur once each year. It's the process by which we carry forward projects into the new TIP document. And during this time, we also change the active years of the TIP to correspond with the start of the new federal fiscal year on October 1st. And then we also have amendments. Those occur continuously throughout the year, and they fall into 3 different categories: formal, administrative, and conformity. Again, anytime a new project is added or existing projects are changed, it's considered an amendment. I do want to clarify one thing here. So as I mentioned in the last slide, new projects can come from either a CMAP or council call for projects, which is done through the CFP module of the eTIP. However, they can also come from other agencies' call for projects or budget actions. For example, IDOT annually adds projects to their bridge and safety programs. When local projects are added to those programs by IDOT, you'll then be asked to add those projects into the eTIP. For the remainder of today's training, when I talk about new projects, project changes, etc., I'll be talking about TIP projects, not CFP applications. So let's quickly run through the amendment types. Formal are any major changes, so that might be the addition or deletion of a project, a major change to cost and design. Formal amendments require public review and comment and demonstration of fiscal constraint, and they also require approval by the CMAP Transportation Committee. Then we have administrative amendments. These are any minor changes to cost, funding sources. They take effect upon CMAP staff review and acceptance, and there are thresholds which determine which revisions require a formal amendment and then which revisions can be completed via an administrative amendment. Administrative amendments or modifications do not require approval by the Transportation Committee, but they will be brought to their attention at their next scheduled meeting. You'll notice here we have FTA and FHWA in parentheses. Administrative amendments are separated by processing agency. We'll see what that looks like later on in the eTIP. And then we finally have conformity amendments. These are amendments involving air quality conformity analysis. They are processed by staff and released by the Transportation Committee for a 30-day public comment period. And final approval of conformity amendments is made by the MPO Policy Committee. So I know you cannot see what this amendment flow looks like here. It was in one of the handouts that I sent yesterday. But in general, this is how the amendment process go. A user submits an amendment for CMAP staff review. Accepted administrative amendments become part of the approved project version. Accepted formal and conformity changes go to the committee or committees. Committee approval triggers state review. State approval triggers federal, and federal approval completes the entire process, and we have those new approved project versions in the eTIP. This process involves approval by multiple parties, so we do have a schedule for submitting amendments that needs to be followed. For formal amendments, those TIP changes are due in the eTIP 10 days prior to the Transportation Committee, and then they're subject to 7 days of public comment prior to being brought to the committee. And then conformity, those happen semi-annually. Typically that is in March and October. Those TIP changes are due in the eTIP about 3 months prior to the policy committee meeting, and they are subject to 30 days of public comment prior to the MPO policy committee meeting. Again, administrative, there's not really a set schedule for those. They take effect upon CMAP staff review and acceptance. So this is the FFY 21 Master Transportation Schedule. I included those in the handouts yesterday. In the red box, you'll see the TIP revision due dates. This is when any formal amendments need to be submitted into the eTIP for CMAP staff review before being brought to the next TC meeting. Notice that those due dates are 10 days prior to the TC meeting. Since we handle conformity amendments a little differently, those dates are listed below the schedule. And then I know that I said administrative amendments can be made at any time. However, the eTIP database is quote unquote closed to users between the TIP revision due date and the Transportation Committee meeting date. There's a calendar version of this schedule on the TIP Programmer Resources webpage that shows the opening and closing dates for all amendments, as well as meeting dates where action on TIP amendments occur, and it also shows the dates that eTIP is closed to users. So I'm going to pause now for any questions. I see there's a chat here. I think it's from Kama. Yes. So if there are any questions right now, feel free to raise your hand, unmute yourself. I'll just pause for a second. Okay, well, hearing none, we'll move on. So now we're going to discuss how program and project versions are documented in the eTIP. Again, at the start of each federal fiscal year, a new TIP program is created. This new program is made up of the projects and line items that have funding in that federal fiscal year, plus the next 4 years. The new program is created via an adoption, and throughout the year, as changes are made, it's amended. Now, we have to have some way to keep track of which TIP program projects belong to in the eTIP. So each year, when the new program is created, it's given a numerical title. The example on the slide is using 2017. So we see that the name of the 2017 TIP program is 17-00. And we know that amendments will occur throughout the year. So the first formal amendment is -01. Individual project amendments are grouped for staff management and committee action. A formal amendment taken to the Transportation Committee may contain multiple projects, and together as a group, those projects and their respective changes make up formal amendment 17-01. So when presented to the TC Committee, we would say something like, included in formal amendment 17-01 are projects A, B, C, and D. There do not have to be similarities in the project changes. It's just about getting the changes into the eTIP in time to be included in the formal amendment. Similarly, we have to have a way to distinguish administrative amendments. As I mentioned, these are separated by processing agency. So we see that the first administrative amendment for FHWA is signified by the point 1, and the first administrative amendment for FTA is identified by the point 2. Any additional amendments just go in sequence, and then this pattern continues. So our second formal amendment would be -02. The first administrative amendment for FHWA would be the 17-02.1, etc. So let's take a look at how this is shown in the eTIP. Like the TIP program, each project has sequential versions, and each time a project is included in an amendment, a new project version is created. So in this screenshot here, we see that it is the 7th version of the project. It was last modified in December of 2016 during the 17-02.1 administrative amendment. And the yellow box there indicates that this is the latest approved version, which appears on the eTIP public website. A list of previous versions can be found on the Amendment History tab. So this is what the Amendment History tab looks like. In this example, version 2 is the current approved version. It has the most recent dates among the approved version, and version 3 is pending. If and when version 3 is approved, it will then be the version visible to the public. To see older approved versions, you can click on the number on the left side. And then you'll also notice that the type of amendment is in parentheses. It's important to make sure you're always working on the latest version of a project. There are 2 ways to check project version. The first is that if you go through the My Project list view, that will always lead you to a list of the latest versions. The other option is just to check that yellow message box at the top of a project. This displays the project status and version. If you're not working on the latest approved version, it'll provide a link to it. So you see it says, please click here to view the latest approved version. So now we're going to step through how to submit amendments. The first step is from the Project Tools menu, select Amend/Modify Project in TIP, and then you're going to want to select an open TIP action. Again, each TIP action listed here represents a group of projects. So if I have a project that requires a formal amendment, and so does CAMA, we would both be selecting 21-03. Not all users will see the same list of open tip actions. For example, only transit agencies and CDOT see the administrative FTA in their list. Typically, you'll only have two choices in this list, a formal and an administrative option. And then twice a year, you may have a third option when a conformity amendment is also open. So after you select the appropriate open tip action, you're going to want to search for the project you want to change. Then you'll select the amend link, and then you can either save in progress or you can submit it to CMAP staff for review. A quick tip here, if you don't know what the idea of your project is or you want to see a full list of projects, you can leave all the fields blank in the advanced search and click search, and it'll show you a full list of projects. Then there are some common questions here that we get. The first one is, what if I don't find a project? There are two possible reasons for it. The first is that you probably don't have edit or read rights for the lead agency. We suggest searching the public site and confirming the project exists and check the lead agency, and then work with the lead agency and or CMAP staff to either get access or have one of them make the change for you. The other possibility is that the project isn't in the current tip action. This most commonly occurs when a project has gone to construction in a prior year and has been marked as financially complete in the tip, but then a cost overrun occurs and additional funds need to be added to the tip to cover that cost overrun. In that case, users should change the tip source field selection from current tip to any tip, and then try the search again. We also get the question, what if there's no amend link? If there's no link, it means that you do not have edit rights. In this case, confirm that you should have edit rights and request them, or have someone else make the change for you. And then finally, sometimes you might see, instead of it saying amend, it'll say locked. Locked means that you cannot make changes because you have already submitted a change, and you will first need to unsubmit the project before making any additional changes. So how do you unsubmit a project to make these additional changes? On the home page, you'll want to select pending or accepted. A project will fall into one of those buckets once it's submitted for CMAP review. Open whichever list contains the project that you want to amend. And then you can just check the box at the far right on the project line and click the Unsubmit button at the top of the page. This will move your project back into the in progress list. Once a project is back in the in progress list, there are two ways to edit it. Option one is to view the list of in progress projects by clicking the link on the home page and then clicking on the tip ID to open that project and make additional changes. The other option is to search for a project by ID or advanced search. If you go this route, you want to click on the status icon and not the tip ID. If you click on the tip ID, you'll open the latest approved version and you're not going to be able to edit it. But if you click on the icon, you'll open an editable version. And then once completed with your changes, you'll submit to CMAP. So, excuse me, in summary, changes are in progress until they're submitted to CMAP staff. Submitted changes are pending until reviewed. Staff will either accept or deny changes. Only accepted changes will be taken to committees for approval. And denied changes will include a reason for denial and will be moved back to the in denied section of the in progress changes. So I know I just threw a lot of information at you on just a few slides. Again, I'm going to pause, see if anyone has any questions. Okay, not seeing or hearing anything. We'll move on to the TIP programming form. So the TIP programming form must be completed for each project, and it consists of the 6 tabs you see on the screen here. In this section, we're just going to step through the first tab, which is the TIP Programming tab. As PLs, you are the first point of contact for project sponsors and responsible for updating projects in the eTIP database. So while you may not be filling this form out from scratch, it's good to be familiar with it. This top section is the administrative area. It's for CMAP staff use only. It shows the TIP action as well as project status related to air quality. So that's exempt status and conformity status. Next, we have the project information section. This contains information about the project title, description, scope, contact, and locations. When reviewing projects, some details you should be looking for in this section are that the title and description are public friendly. Please note that the project description field has a 500-character limit. The project type should reflect the overall major theme of the project. For work type, all that are appropriate should be selected. This helps CMAP staff determine the exempt and conformity status. And then for location information, projects should be divided into segments based on changes along the route, such as speed and number of lanes. The Map and Documents tab, which we'll discuss later, should also provide useful information in order to check that this location section has been filled out accurately. The next section is programming information, which details current and prior funding. There should be one line per source and phase, with the exception of construction and construction engineering. And every federal line must have a corresponding match line. And then line item specific IDs should be entered on the far right there. The drop downs for the IDs are auto-populated based on information provided in the ID tab, which we'll touch on later. And then next we have the schedule section. This is really just used to help generate reports of upcoming projects and predict time frames for meeting targets. I want to point out here that open to traffic should be the year that the project will be complete and open for use by the public. And then finally, we have the change reason section. This alerts staff and review agencies to what they should be focusing on during their review. 99% of the time, the change reason will be schedule, funding, scope, and then all applicable options from the drop-down menu should be selected. There is also an other change reason and a narrative box. The other reason should just be short. This is visible to the public. And then the narrative box should be used to explain to CMAP and review agencies anything out of the ordinary about the change. The next tab that is part of the TIP programming form that we're going to discuss is the map. So the map is powered by Google Maps. It has both a map and satellite view, as well as road and bikeway layers. And then it has some custom tools that we'll walk through, like selecting features and creating nodes. In general, all projects must be mapped. Of course, there are always exceptions, as you see listed here. So, things like transit projects, off-road bike and ped projects, and then non-infrastructure projects can't be mapped. If a project can't be mapped, there should be an attachment in the Documents tab showing location or a reason for why it can't be mapped. So again, there are two layers. This slide details the source and symbol for each characteristic of the two layers. So the data either comes from the I.Iris system or CMAP data, and then our bikeways layer comes from the Regional Greenways and Trails Plan. So you'll see here that the highway and trails are lines, intersections are squares, bridges and other structures are triangles, and then transit stops, rail stations, crossings are circles. I do want to note that bus stops are not included. There are just way too many of them to be on the map. So here's a visual of the map and its symbols. You'll see there is the train station and the rail highway grade crossing circles, bridge structures, and then each intersection has the blue squares as the intersection nodes. This slide might seem kind of funny. When you first click on the map tab though, you won't see this level of detail. You need to zoom in to see all the segments and features. It's also important to zoom in so that you don't leave out any gaps when selecting road segments. So selecting roads is really simple. You just click on each individual segment. Once you click on a segment, it turns red. If you want to unselect it, it goes back to blue. And in general, these segments are characterized by changes in the roadway, so pavement, speed, etc. Same thing applies when selecting transit or rail stops and stations. Again, those are identified by the light blue circles, and when you select those, they turn red. Same thing for bridges. Those are the light blue triangles. Select them and turn red. Bridges are the one location that may not appear super logical. In instances where there may be multiple bridges in close proximity, it may be difficult to differentiate and determine which bridge is part of the project. So to determine the appropriate bridge to select, you'll want to go to the IDOT website, which is listed at the bottom of this slide. The bridge locations on the IDOT website are the same as in the eTIP. However, the IDOT webpage provides information about each bridge, which allows you to match the correct bridge symbol in the eTIP map to the correct bridge in the project. Additionally, we also have bike routes to map. So if a route is on or near the road, you can just select the road. If it's off-road, you'll want to switch to the bikeways layer. You'll see that in the top left corner. If neither of these options work, a map should be attached on the Documents tab to detail where the bike route is. And then selecting intersections, a rule of thumb for that, for intersections that have work beyond the immediate intersection, you want to select both that intersection node and the continuing segments. And then if there's work at one or more intersections that are not included along the project segments, make sure that you select those intersection nodes as well. Sometimes when we're mapping projects, we may need to adjust the length of a segment. To adjust a segment, you want to click the segment you want to adjust first, and then click on Adjust Segment Start End on the top right corner of the map. Once selected, the two ends of the segment will be marked with location points, and you can drag them in either direction. When you're finished, you do need to click Exit to get out of that segment adjuster. Similarly, to create a node, in the top right corner, click Create a Node, select where you want your node, and then click Exit. Don't forget to either save location when finished or click Reset if you made a mistake. The map also has a measuring tool. Sometimes projects don't end at an intersection, so this is a good way to see where exactly to map a project. This is a similar process to adjusting a segment or adding a node. There is a Measure a Distance button in the top right corner, and then you can drop these pins to measure the distance. This can be useful when completing the length fields on the TIP programming form. Just a note that if it is used for that, the map is done in feet and the length fields are in miles, so you wouldn't need to make that conversion from feet to miles. Some other notes here: maps can be added and updated at any time and are not an amendment. Maps must be saved while on the Map tab, and maps are included in the Public Site Project Overview and Amendment Reports. It may seem like we spent a lot of time talking about mapping. The information provided on the mapping, as well as the location details on the programming form, are used by CMAP staff to update the travel demand model, and then outputs from the travel demand model influence the conformity evaluations of the region's TIP and regional transportation plan. So it's also important to other CMAP work that the Map tab is up to date and accurate. Now let's take a look at the project ID section. This is a quick section. Excuse me. So in addition to the TIP ID auto-generated by the eTIP database, other ID numbers will be assigned over the life of a project. This is also a place where project-specific website addresses may be entered. And these IDs are also searchable from the home page, but only if entered in the correct format. So this slide shows the correct format. Really, the only format changes to the state job number and federal project number. So if you want to search from those from the search box, the state number, you would need that X. And then for federal project numbers, you want to leave out any prefixes, dashes, and parentheses. And then, as I previously mentioned, IDs entered on this tab are used to populate the drop-down values in the Programming Information section of the TIP Programming tab. These ID drop-downs can be updated and saved at any time. It's not an amendment until it's associated with individual financial line items. So another very brief section here, just to walk you through the Documents tab. Here is what that looks like. This should be a place to store any project-related documents. So those might be PPI forms, any other project information, as well as public involvement or media coverage. Providing as much detailed information as possible may help speed up the state and federal approval process. So to upload a file, you want to click on the cloud icon, select Choose File, and then you can upload a max of 6 files at a time. Then you want to click the Upload selected and wait until the screen refreshes. If you don't wait, they will not upload. Please note that the document date is the date that the document was sent, signed, published, etc. It's not the date that you're attaching it in the eTIP. Also, for larger documents, we do suggest uploading one at a time. And then just like the Map and IDs tab, which can be saved at any time without an amendment, documents can be added at any time without an amendment. So we just walked through quite a few different sections of the eTIP, and our next section is rather lengthy. So I'm going to pause again here and see if there are any questions before I proceed. Are you guys all still awake? Thanks, Elaine. Don't worry, we're on slide 65 at 85, so we're getting there. Okay, well, if I don't see any questions, we'll move on ahead then. So now we're going to talk about the Obligations tab. When awarding funding, the U.S. government enters into an agreement called an obligation. So when CMAQ or when STP, CMAQ, etc., money is awarded to projects, the sponsor is coming into an obligation with the government, and the government is then obligated to reimburse the project as it progresses and reaches its milestones. The data on the Obligation tab comes from FHWA's FMIS database, that stands for Financial Management Information System, and this data is uploaded nightly. Because of the data source, the Obligation tab is only detailing federal funding through FHWA. It does not have FTA, state, or local funding details. The data upload also relies on matching either the federal project number or state job number in FMIS with data in the eTIP. So it's particularly important that those IDs are entered accurately in the project ID section. So there are 3 sections on the Obligation tab. There's the Obligation Data, which is an overview of obligations. And then we have Obligated Detail, which shows detailed transactions. And then the FMIS Code Summary. Those last 2 are hidden by default. So here's the obligation data. Some things I want to point out here. The fund source in the obligated funds column may often be different from the TIP programmed fund source, as there's not a direct one-to-one match from FHWA's buckets of money to ours, and the state has flexibility to use any eligible source. They often substitute funds in order to use up older funds first, or to ensure that Illinois is not vulnerable to federal rescissions of any fund source. Programmed fund sources in the TIP should not be changed if a different source is obligated, unless CMAP staff instructs the programmer to do so. Then we see the obligated column here. Funds here should be equal to or less than the program TIP amount. If they are not, a TIP change to add additional funds must be completed. Then we have the unobligated column. That's just the difference between TIP amount and obligated. And then we have our authorized AC or advanced construction. This is when FHWA has authorized the project to move forward with state appropriation or other non-federal means, with the option to seek reimbursement of federal funds at a later point. And then finally, we have our expended column, which is just the amount of money that has been paid out by the federal government. So in this example here, we see that in 2017, there was an amount of about $120,000 in AC. This was converted in 2019, as seen by the negative red value in the AC column and a matching positive value in the obligated column. Because that AC amount was less than the STP amount awarded in 2019, there was a remaining balance of about $4,000, as seen in the unobligated column. And then currently, in 2021, that STP money is unobligated, but it should be obligated during this federal fiscal year, as the money is intended to be used this year, and then the lead agency will seek reimbursement. A quick note about the movement of the AC funds. The programmer would have received an AC notification email in 2017, and then an AC conversion notification email in 2019. When they received the conversion notice, they would have changed the program year of the federal funds to 2019. The purpose of this slide is to show that it is possible to have programming and obligations for multiple phases in the same FFY. In the top screenshot, we see that for 2017, the funds are programmed for construction engineering, construction, and engineering 2. And then in the bottom screenshot, which is the programming information section from the TIP programming form, it shows that construction and construction engineering are in AC, and the engineering 2 is in ACC. ACC just means that the funds have been converted from AC for federal reimbursement. Here we have the obligated details section. This shows transaction by date with oldest at the top. So to quickly walk through this one, we see that in December 2015, there was an AC authorization of about $106,000 in STP funds. This was for engineering 2. We know it was for engineering 2 because there is a D in the state ID. Also, we can read the description. And this is also a good example of when the calendar year isn't the same as the FFY. So here it is in 2015, but it's actually federal fiscal year 2016. Then we see in September of 2016, the fund source for the AC authorization was changed from STP to NHPP. So we see that those NHPP funds were added and the STP funds were removed. Then in January of 2017, there was an AC authorization of about $1.7 million in STP funds for construction. In the FMIS system, construction and construction engineering are combined, so it's likely that the $1.7 million also includes funds for construction engineering. And then finally, in March of 2017, we see that the engineering 2 funding was converted, which shows as a negative in the AC column and a positive in the obligated column. So far on this project, it looks like no funds have actually been expended. Due to that ACC for engineering 2 in the last line item, it's likely the invoice, was issued and it was just going to take a few weeks for it to show up. This is a pretty straightforward project. As they get more complex with more federal project numbers, it can be helpful to drill down further by federal project. You can do so by clicking on the blue Fed ID link. It'll show you something like this. It's the same information, but only for one federal ID. There should be only one federal ID assigned per project phase. You'll also notice that this view includes subtotals by FFY. So for this example, we have 2016 and 2017 subtotals. And then finally, there is the FMIS code summary section. This displays obligated funds, not including AC funds, expended and then unexpended funds for all years. This is the last slide of this section. We have one more section to go through, and then we'll pause for any questions at the end. So we're just going to run through some of the report options available in the eTIP to wrap things up today. Most reports require users to make a set of selections to set the parameters for the report. This is just one example here. Some reports have additional filtering options. Standard filtering for most reports is tip action, funding type, and then the ability to limit it to a certain project type, lead agency, and/or county. And then you'll notice that the name of the report is shown in the top left corner. Once you hit Run Report, the report will show up on your screen. This slide shows features that are available for some, but not all of the reports. So in general, you can sort by clicking on the column title. You can drill down to additional information by clicking on the row label. That includes subtotals and grand totals. You can open a project record by clicking on the tip ID, and then you can always export to Excel. The reports do tend to be high-level summaries, so drilling down is often useful for digging into more detail. And then just a reminder that when you do drill down or export to Excel, the data you get is filtered or limited by whatever choices you made when you first ran the report. So we'll just do a quick overview of these 3 report types: financial constraints, amount programmed by fund, and line items. So financial constraints, these are actually 2 separate reports in the list. There is the agency financial constraints and then financial constraints, which is for the full region. Each report has 2 options, so you can select Show Balance Detail. That will show revenue, programmed amounts, and balances. Or you can select All Funds, and that includes every eTIP fund source, whether constrained or not. We recommend using the Balance Detailed option, and it's what I used in the next 2 slides. So here we have agency revenue and balance detail. In this example, I just left the default filters, so that was all for lead agency and county. I'm only showing years 21 and 22 here for simplicity, but the full report also includes all current tip years, so through 2025. Clicking on any of the agencies there displays all the projects with that fund source for which that agency is the lead agency. And then clicking on the fund source subtotal displays all the projects with that fund source regardless of the lead agency. So just quickly walking through what these different columns are. Prior are funds that were programmed prior to the current FFY, so funds that are allocated to projects that are in progress. Rev 2021 carryover, those are funds not obligated in prior FFYs and were carried over. Rev 2021, that is what's available to spend, the funds allocated in the current FFY. Then we have total program 2021. That is the amount that's programmed for each FFY. It also includes the amount in ACC for that current year. And then finally, we have balance of 2021. That is just the revenue minus the total programmed. What you really want to watch out for in these reports are the values in red. This indicates that the program is not financially constrained and potentially indicates that something has been entered or updated incorrectly. We suggest running this report anytime you make major or multiple changes to ensure that everything has remained within budget. You'll notice that on the top left here, it's giving you a note that says Fiscal Constraints Alert. So here we have the regional revenue and balance detail report view. Again, the amounts are for the entire region, and this is just using the default filters, so all for lead agency and county. And then again, notice it's giving you that same Fiscal Constraints Alert in the top left, because we have some negative values in the balance 2021 column. Our next report is the Programmed by Fund. This report type has the same standard tip actions and status selections. You're able to multi-select individual sources or groups of sources. And for this report, there are 3 options to group by, and those are fiscal year and phase, and only totals. So we're going to look at those quickly. So this is just by FY. Note that in this example, it's filtered to a single council. In this instance, I used DuPage so that it would fit on the screen. And the years are filtered to 21 to 25 because I selected the 21-00 adoption from the TIP start field. You'll see that it lists all the different funding sources for DuPage that are programmed in the 21-00 adoption. Clicking on the fund source, a subtotal, or a grand total will provide a list of projects that fit that category you clicked. This report can be useful for getting a sense of how much federal, state, or local investments there are in an area, or how much of a certain fund type is programmed in an area. This is just showing by FY and phase. Again, it's still DuPage, and I selected the 21-00 adoption. This is just a snippet of the report. So we'll see we have a column for engineering that includes engineering 1 and 2, a column for right-of-way, and then a column for construction, which includes both construction and construction engineering. And then we have the only totals option. This shows totals by fund source for the filtered conditions. In this example, lead agency was left as the default, which is all. And again, it's DuPage, so I could fit it onto a single slide for you. And then lastly, we have the line items report. This report is especially useful because it provides the latest amended version of your line items. Similarly to the previous reports, it has the standard tip action and status selections filters. You can also filter by funding source and are able to make multiple selections. The line items report can be particularly useful to planning liaisons when developing new programs or preparing for semi-annual coordination meetings with IDOT and CMAP. It's also useful for preparing for the adoption at the end of the federal fiscal year. As a reminder, the results of all reports can be exported to Excel, where you can sort, group, and filter further. So that was our last slide here. Here is CMAP staff contact information. The eTIP user guide should be your go-to source of help for eTIP. I did send out some materials yesterday. Those all came from, the TIP Programmer Resources page on CMAP, and you can always find the latest materials on that page. The eTIP user guide goes into way more detail on fields, functions, reports than I went over today. And it also provides information about other reports and features that I didn't cover. So please make sure you take a chance and review that. So that is the end of today's eTIP training. I'll pause again and see if anyone has any questions.